Good evening. I'll call the meeting to order at this time. If you will, please rise for the invocation and remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance. This time I will call on the Mayor Pro Tem to lead us in the invocation, please.
Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we come tonight, Lord, to serve the community and the people that live here. Father, we pray that you'll be with each person here and those that ain't able to attend, Father. We just pray, Lord, a special blessing over this meeting, that you'll help us make the decisions, help our community prosper and grow as we all intend for it to do in your best will, Father. We also pray a special prayer over our youth, Father, that's recently graduated from high school, college, and are enrolling in school, Lord, that during this summer break you'll give them a break. Help them plan their lives as successful, Lord, as you'll have them be. We ask all this in Christ's name. Amen.
Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, gentlemen, we have the agenda in front of you. I don't think we have any known changes to the agenda. Any additions or corrections to the agenda at this time from you?
Mayor, I move we approve the agenda as set.
Second. Or just announce it. We're already going into Hold on one second, Henry. I might need you to amend that agenda.
I'm going to amend the agenda. Just amend the agenda. Purpose of litigation.
Okay. All right. So, Mr. Ashley, will you amend your agenda? I'm sorry. We do need to add one item to the closed session. We're already going into closed session, but we need to add one item to discuss legal matters.
I will accept the request for amendment and amend my motion accordingly.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. All in favor to amend the agenda? All opposed? Thank you, gentlemen. And we'll move on to our public hearings this evening. Our first public hearing is Community Development Block Grant. And this is not a quasi-judicial public hearing, so there's no need for anyone to be sworn in. The first public hearing is the Community Development Block Grant. The town of Smithfield is considering submitting a Small Cities Community Development Block Grant Program, Neighborhood Revitalization Program application in the amount of $750,000 for housing revitalization. This time, I will open the public hearing. Ask for a motion to open the public hearing.
So move, Mayor.
And a second? Motion and a second. All in favor? Aye. And at this time, I'll turn it over to Mr. Scott, and Mr. Green, I think, is here. Yep.
That's right. Mr. Skip Green's here. He is a person who's done a lot of work for the town over the course of the last 8 months on this grant. We did submit the grant once previously, and we did not receive an award. We feel confident, however, that in this round, we'll be more competitive, and hopefully we'll receive an award for the request. Good.
Yeah, since we are basically resubmitting the same application, we still have to have this as a second public hearing to discuss the application. I have here like a manual PowerPoint, but this is just very quickly give you an idea where the project area, and this is some idea of the actual target area that we're working at. It's very same that was in the prior application. Within this area, there will be 23 houses to be rehabilitated. 2 are rehabilitations. 1 is a reconstruction. The major difference is the reconstruction is just the amount of money per square foot. There also would be 3 lots where we have dilapidated houses have been identified, and they would be demolished and cleared. The budget is $650,000 that would be for housing. That $650,000 includes any type of temporary relocation that we may have due to the severity of the house while it's being rehabbed. It also includes $500 per house for title search. We are able to put that there. Title search will be required as a part of the loan application process. And then there's $750,000 is for the project administration. So that it's the maximum, it's a total of $750,000. All of the homes to be rehabilitated or owner-occupied, all of the owners have either a low or moderate income. The application as far as the due date, if the council should choose to resubmit, it's a July 16th as far as the due date. At your next council meeting, we would have the authorization resolution for y'all to consider. I would be glad to answer any questions that y'all may have concerning the application.
Any questions for Skip?
I do have a question for Mr. Green. Mr. Green, thank you for your efforts to help in Smithfield. My question to you is, you spoke of owner occupants and people that, if they are, how do they find out about the program and what requirements they have to have besides the, you mentioned the moderate and low income. For example, how long do they have to be homeowners? Do you?
We had, what we did with the first applications, we had a series, we actually had 3 neighborhood meetings.
Okay.
And so all of those were publicly, as far as notices were run. Also, we worked with the churches in the area, so we made a concentrated effort to make sure everyone was aware of it. When we were doing the actual surveys, it was door to door, so everyone in the area should have. If they weren't there, there was we left a flyer to make them aware of the program. Outside, so at that time, we established it was like a 8:31. It's when we did at the first public meeting, we established a time that as of that date, you had to be a resident, and we are continuing to maintain that time.
Okay.
Outside of the, again, owner occupant, the low to moderate income, the other parts as far as how the program is designed is the assistance to the, is a deferred forgivable loan. It's not an out-and-out grant. That is determined, it's between 5 to 7 years, depending on how much the rehabilitation is of the house. So when we went around as a part of we did actually an application just to be considered for the application that was submitted. And so we made the people aware. At that time, we went through to be sure they understood it was a deferred loan. So we would have quite a few people. Well, there is always concern from a homeowner that in the event of particularly some of the elderly, if they should become deceased before the term, that there would be some type of debt then would be passed on to their heirs. So that is one of the reasons why you just don't go everybody immediately says, because again, it's not set up as a grant.
Just want to make sure that it's fair and the people that qualify know about it and can seek that.
Right. The way within that target area that I showed you, is everyone that made an application was included. So the only people that would not have been included would have been those that did not give voice to participate.
Thank you.
Skip, it's also might be important to mention that our hope is to get funded this time around, but the goal is to keep this going for a while. This isn't like one grant and we're done. The goal is to continue moving through the area and then other areas of town and continue this process.
Yeah, that is correct. The state for the housing rehab almost every year since the mid-70s, the state did housing rehab. It went through a period for about 4 to 5 years that they stopped doing housing rehab. All the money went to infrastructure. But that now has changed. So they are back with the housing rehab program. And some of the changes that are in the new program, as far as it has to be owner occupied. These are some changes that I think that the state will look to make the program run smoother. This will be the second round of funds as far since they have started the neighborhood revitalization. And to your point, there should continue to be money for housing rehab as long as the state puts it in their program, their plan.
How does it work when you have a lot that needs to be cleared, and the fact that that can't be owner occupied?
The owner occupied has to be is only for housing rehab. As far as lot clearance, that's where it would be as far as the city, or when I went around with Mike, is we looked at lots that would fall within, that y'all would want to have cleared. So the owner occupied is only when we are rehabbing structures to get a loan. It does not go over into the actual clearance.
So if I have a house that's dilapidated, maybe I misunderstood you, so if it's a dilapidated house you want to tear down, how does the recapture work there? Because obviously I couldn't occupy.
There is no, the recapture is only for an occupied house that's been rehabbed that people live in. It has, the demolition clearance is totally separate rules.
I'm with you.
And after we get through, again, with the question, I'll entertain any more questions as we then would open it up for just any public comment that we may have.
Is anyone in the audience wishing to speak on this matter? So please come forward at this time.
Good evening. My name's Tony Nix, and I live at 8 Cedar Drive. Thank you, first of all, Mr. Mayor and members of the council. I am chairman of the East Smithfield Improvement Organization in East Smithfield, and I just wanted to let you gentlemen know that we are in full support of this CDB grant for the town of Smithfield. I know we've identified the target area initially, but as someone stated earlier, this will be something that will benefit the entire town. And as you guys are aware, you know, our town is aging. So there's going to come a need for a lot of housing and rehabilitation, so seniors are going to need this program going forward also. And this will also enhance just the overall appearance and quality of life for so many people here in Smithfield. So, you know, I hope that you guys are in full support of this as we move forward. And thank you, Mike, for your leadership on in getting this grant through the second time. We were a little disappointed the first time, but you know, we're hopeful that this time that we will be at the top of the list. So just wanted to again say that we are in full support of that. We've had a lot of folks that are constantly asking about what happened with the grant. So now we'll be really excited about telling them that we're going to be bringing that back around again. So thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Anyone else wishing to speak on this matter? Any other questions for Skip at this time? If not, I will entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Thank you.
So moved.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor? All opposed. Okay. What's the pleasure of the council? Have a motion to authorize the staff to submit the application.
Second.
A motion and a second to allow staff to submit the application. Motion and a second. All in favor? All opposed. Motion carries. Thank you, gentlemen. And we'll move on to our next public hearing is ZA-19-02 for the town of Smithfield. The planning department is requesting an amendment to UDO Article 6, Section 6.5, Table of Uses and Activities to allow food trucks in an ONI B1 and B2 zoning districts, and Article 7, Section 7.25, Food trucks to revise the supplemental standards for food trucks. This time, I'll ask for a motion to open the public hearing.
Make a motion to open the public hearing.
Motion is second, all in favor? Motion carries.
All right,
Over
thank
to
you.
you, Mr. Planning Director.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. So this zoning text amendment is here tonight because we've discovered through an application that our ordinance was not in line with how we've been implementing or administering this food truck ordinance. For some time, staff has been allowing food trucks at the Ham and Yam, other events downtown, in the parks, and I don't think we got our arms around the fact that the current code only allows it in the B3, and so almost all those events would be impossible without this amendment, because we really got to have our code in line with what we're doing. So we are asking that the food truck ordinance also allow food trucks in the O&I, the B1 and the B2 districts, in addition to the B3. And then with that, we are updating Article 7, the standards for food trucks, to make more sense of how people want to use food trucks and just some improvements to that ordinance. So currently, they're only allowed in the B3 with standards. They have been operating in parks and commercial districts with special events since the ordinance was adopted. Outside of temporary events and the flea market, there's only been one food truck in operation, and I think it's been intermittent at the Pottery Outlets. There's been discussion about one in West Smithfield, but nothing has happened yet. So 7.25 is the supplementary standards for food trucks. So this is the simple change to Article 6. We'd be adding a permitted with standards to O&I, B1, and B2. The proposed amendments to 7.25 include clarifying exceptions to supplementary standards. Food trucks be permitted to operate from town property or closed public right-of-way during a town-sponsored civic event or town council-approved special event. 7.25.2, we'd be amending the duration of food truck zoning permits from 20 days, 3 individual weekends, weekend events, to 90 days per calendar year. It's kind of hard for staff to kind of monitor which weekends people are out there. If we just allow them 90 days, and at the end of 90 days, they have to move on. It's just easier for us to monitor if we need to. 7.25.3, we added to location for food trucks that they must be at least 100 feet from the front door of a restaurant or dining area during business hours, and change the text to allow it within 5 feet of a public sidewalk. 7.25.4, food trucks will also have to have a Johnston County application for a mobile food unit when applicable, NC sales and use certificate, NC Department of Agricultural permits when applicable. Essentially, these are health, safety requirements that weren't in our code, but they're supposed to have. So they just need to show proof that they have them. 7.25.7, allowing a small sandwich board sign for food trucks, similar to what is allowed for businesses in town. There wasn't really a provision for a menu board. You typically see a menu board out in front of a food truck. It seemed like a simple thing to do, and that was actually requested by Sarah in her read of the draft. 7.25.8, increase the area in which food trucks must keep the property clean. Typically, people are milling around a food truck, kind of within that zone. I think it was 5 feet before. We increased it to, I believe, 15 feet. 7.25.9.1, we created an exception for food trucks operating at the flea market. Right now, there's numerous food trucks at the flea market, and we're treating them as though they're another flea market booth. So there's no limit on the number of them. They're just allowed to operate under the flea market SUP. And the last one here is creating an exception on the number of food trucks and location of food trucks operating under a town-sponsored event or town council-approved special event. So when that special event is applied for, they spell out how many food trucks and where they're going to be located, and we hold them to that as long as it makes sense on the plan, rather than having an arbitrary limit, which we had in the code before. So staff feels that this zoning text amendment, as proposed, is consistent with the Smithfield comp plan and other adopted plans, and that it's in the public interest. Planning board endorsed the zoning text amendment and recommend approval. And staff and the planning board then are recommending approval of the zoning text amendment, declaring the request consistent with the town comprehensive plan, and it's reasonable in the public interest. And with that, I'll take any questions.
Mr. Mayor, I have a question, Mr. Wendell. Thank you, sir. On 725.3, it mentions that add the location for food trucks that must be at least 100 feet from the front door of a restaurant or dining area during the business hours, and change the text to allow within 5 feet. So are you taking out the 100 feet requirement and just putting it 5 feet by the sidewalk? That's on
It still has
page-
to be 100 feet, but only during restaurant hours.
Okay.
Because
I think that was
If
a-
the restaurant's closed, it really doesn't matter much.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure, because some questions about that. And I saw the comments from the planning board. One of the concerns I'd love for you to address is, there was some discussion about beer and wine. Did y'all ever get clarification on that? Would these food trucks be allowed to serve beer and wine?
I did not get any clarification on that.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions from council at this time? Not, is there anyone in the audience wishing to speak on this matter? Anyone?
Will they have to have a business license also?
Well, they have to have a zoning license and all the permits that were required listed in the code.
So what is this, and I'm sure you said this, but does this limit the number of trucks? I know you said there was an exception for town sponsored
On
events.
special events, there's no limit, it's just with the permit.
But you keep referring to the flea market.
The flea
And-
market,
and-
there's not a
and-
limit either.
All right,
I think currently I believe there's 7 of them operating at a flea market.
so there's no limit, and there would be no limit as part of this, is that what you said? Because right now, you said they were operating under
Right now,
the
you can have one,
booth, right? And there is some kind of limit there,
yeah.
right? So
if I
is this
wanna-
opening it up to 100 trucks
Let
at the
me
flea
clarify.
market? Because
Let me
if so, we're going to have to talk.
If I want to operate a food truck, let's say on one of the businesses downtown, you're allowed to have one food truck as a accessory to an existing business. And you'd have to get a permit, and it's good for 90 days. Someone else could have a food truck and a zoning permit, or you could have 2 zoning permits for 2 trucks on 2 different properties. So there's not a limit on that, but you'd have to have a zoning permit for each and pay the fee and show where on that property you're gonna have a food truck. But on special events and the flea market, there is no limit on the number. It's, with special events, you would identify at the special event how many food trucks you're gonna have and where they're gonna be. And we would review that and make sure it makes sense, meeting all the criteria in the standards. And as long as it's not causing any trouble, we issue the permit. The flea market, we just treated it as though it's another vendor. They regulate their vendors, they locate their vendors where it's appropriate on their property. We don't have any real involvement on where that is, other than, if the special use permit comes back through, we could maybe look at it through the special use permit process, but at this point, it's just another vendor. That's how we're treating it.
So when we approve this flea market, do we approve it for food trucks?
Not specifically, no.
I'm not sure how then we treat it as another vendor, but I'm concerned on the, because you keep, I'm concerned because you keep bringing up flea market
Well, the
and
flea market,
as an extra category. and
Because-
I haven't heard you say that anywhere else, right? And I can tell you right now, over the last 3 months, my phone has rung off the hook about the flea market.
understood.
Okay? All right? I couldn't even get out of my car last Sunday before someone came up to my car at church. Okay? And I had 3 people at church hit me up about the flea market. Right? So I keep hearing flea markets. I want to make sure, I'm not picking on the flea market, but I don't want to do something that's going to cause more traffic and more of a hazard in that area.
Understood.
Because it is bad.
You are absolutely correct that the flea market is out of compliance with a special use permit. We are trying to work with the owner to bring that facility in line. That being said, we know there are food trucks operating out there, and we are trying to make it correct with our ordinance. You know, it seems to be an operation that's going on. It doesn't seem to be causing trouble with the food truck specifically. Yes, the numbers and the expansion of the food market, the flea market is maybe the bigger issue, and we're hoping to address that through a special use permit. And, you know, if there are some through the special use permit process, you know, we want to control where the food trucks are, or maybe put limits on the SUP on the number of food trucks. We could do it through there. We could also do it here as well, but, you know, we don't want to pass an ordinance and immediately have to do enforcement on the food trucks operating at the flea market when we have bigger, I mean, the whole flea market's an issue right now. So I'm trying to legitimize the ability for the food trucks to operate the flea market as they are and address the special use permit when that comes up. You know, it's up to the council how they feel about that. I wrote it in because I know it's there.
That's why I'm asking the question, because you seem to keep referring back to that, so.
A lot of things happen,
Yeah.
and we're trying to make sense of them.
Yeah. Okay.
I do have a question. So and I read the information. The question for me is, so who decides whether or not the food truck is acceptable at this location in town? I mean, now we're opening it up to a lot of places across town. P1, P2, P3, I mean, you know, it sounds like it's going to be more which areas are we not going to have food trucks, and which areas we're going to have food trucks. But the question is, who makes the determination whether or not that food truck location that they're going to park that food truck is acceptable? Or can they just park anywhere they want to if they're in the B1, 2, B2, B3? I mean, that's my, you understand what I'm saying? I mean, besides meeting the requirements of not being within 100 feet of an open restaurant and 5 feet from a curb, and that's all I've heard requirements. You see what I mean? I mean, who makes that determination? Because somebody say, hey, I'm 100 feet from there, I'll park me 5 feet from the curb and good to go.
Well, the concern with the location of the front door of a restaurant is we don't want them to be necessarily competing directly
I understand that.
head-on-head with the restaurant. You know, if someone wants to open a food truck, they need to find a willing partner, a business that wants to have a food truck parked in the parking lot. They have to identify the parking stall to which it's going to sit, and we're going to make sure it's in a safe spot, so it's not blocking traffic or creating a pedestrian hazard. It's probably our biggest concern, right? It's just making sure health safety is addressed. And then they need to meet these other requirements that are in the code. Other than that, I mean, they need a willing business partner. Has to be a business on that property. It can't be a vacant property or a dilapidated, you know, empty business. So, and I tell you, we've only had 2 requests, you know, in 3 years for food trucks at a business location, partially because you're only allowed at 3 weekends a year or 20 days. We're going to increase it to 90 because it's just difficult to monitor. That way you can kind of reasonably be sure they're going to come in there in the summer months, and that'd probably be it. And then special events. All the food trucks, I shouldn't say all, most of the food trucks we get are through special events and the flea market, apparently. And, you know, the parks director has been having food trucks in the parks for years, and he decides where they go. He makes sure that the permit makes sense for his facility, and we're not gonna interfere with that.
So did you say there was a limitation on how many? I think Mayor was asked that several times too. I'm not really sure. No, the flea market, we're not talking about flea market now. So we're talking about everything else. Because you have to have a willing business, but is only one per business, or is
Right.
there? Okay. So you'd have to have, if you have more than one in a parking lot, then you'd have to have had multiple businesses co-partnering with them. That's what you're saying.
Yes.
What zone is the flea market?
B3,
And that's where they're allowed now?
they're allowed, but they've been operating there without, you know, they don't meet the ordinance, because you're only allowed one per, or four, I think it's four is the max currently.
I still don't understand the exception.
I'm creating an exception because, I mean,
But you're
we
amending
don't have
your
to,
ordinance.
we don't have to accept it. It's just something that I felt it's there. They've been operating, and if you think about how the flea market operates, vendors come and go, and it seems like the food trucks, in a sense, are another vendor. And
Not
the
sure if you've
council,
been out there on a Sunday.
well, the council doesn't have to
See
agree.
how it's
The
set
council
up.
could strike that,
I'm
that,
not exactly sure, yeah.
you know,
I
I had
get
no
it, I get
guidance.
it.
I'm just trying to carve out what is currently going on in the city and what seems to make sense. And I'm asking for the council to review that, and if that is a problem,
I don't know that.
we can fix it.
Problem, that's why I'm asking.
Yeah.
I'm asking, you know, from your opinion. Right, so,
Well, I'm not out there on weekends, but I hear.
yeah. Any other questions? Anyone else, or anyone in the audience, Ms. Lampy? If you'll come forward, if you'd like to speak.
Pam Lampy at 415 North Second Street. And Steve, I just had a question about the ones that are in the parks. Will they be allowed to stay for 3 months? Or will they be just a weekend kind of thing? The ones that are on town property?
Well, I mean, the town technically could allow them to be there for 3 months, but the town is going to allow them through special permits. So if there's an event that the park director is involved with, someone will make a, you know, they want to do a road race and they want to have at the end of the road race a food truck, he will review that and say, yes, it's appropriate to have 1, 2, or 3, given the venue, and work with the applicant that way.
Anyone else wishing to speak on this matter? See any other questions from the council at this time? If not, I will entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Move to close the public hearing.
Second. Motion and a second, all in favor? Opposed? Okay. What's the pleasure of the council?
Here, I have one concern. I totally support a business entrepreneur and a food truck. I don't think it should challenge a stick and mortar type restaurant. The concern I have is the stick and mortar restaurants are regulated based on location and time of operation. For serving alcohol, I would ask the council to consider putting a restriction on there, the distance of a place of worship, that the food truck ain't out front of a church selling alcohol. If, in fact, they obtain the permit, I just would ask that the council consider that. That was one of my concerns. The other concern I had was in relationship to the, you know, we have festivals and things, it's primarily is food trucks. I hope it wouldn't hinder that, but at the same time, the concern with mass gatherings, whether it be a flea market, a circus, a 301 yard sale, I just think that we need to be careful with the congestion that this could potentially cause. You know, I don't know if we could put a restriction on that to some degree of a certain number within a certain area. And my other concern would be how we would police that. I think it's already addressed. The planning board brought several of these things to concerns, and I think we need to echo their concerns.
ABC commission would allow selling of beer and wine out of a food truck?
You see beer trucks at most public events elsewhere, so I would imagine there is a carve-out somewhere for it. I'm not quite sure how they permit it.
But ain't most of those mass gatherings with ticketed entrance with security?
I'm sure they do.
Yeah, because, I mean, you know, a come and go at a shopping area is not a controlled in, controlled out with security, as would, say, a concert type thing.
Agreed.
So I just need to be careful how that's worded.
Could we require some kind of approval for that prior to them being able to do such, sell alcohol? I mean, I'm saying, because that's really appears to be really the biggest holdup for, I think, a number of us, you know, because that brings a whole different thing to it. And I know if I've seen food trucks in other places that do sell alcohol, beer, wine, all that stuff out of their trucks. So I know North Carolina allows it to be done, because, you know, I go to Raleigh and see any of those things, there's all over the place. So I know that's a possibility, but the question is, you know, we're not Raleigh, we're in a town, and we want to make sure we control our town. So I'm saying, is there a way that we can put in the order some type of a special use permit for that? That they would have to have a special use permit that's approved before they can do that particular activity? That way we can take consideration location, clientele, you know, security all around it, all those things, because that is a factor.
When an applicant applies for a temporary use permit, there is on the application, you know, question about security. And with a special event, if you have a large gathering of 100 people, you need to have security. I think it'd be reasonable to have, if you're serving beer or wine, you would also have security. And that'd just be part of the application. About a ticketed, I have seen beer and wine trucks at farmers markets, those sort of things that are just the general public coming and going. So I know it's not only ticketed events, but I do believe they probably do have a police presence and a certain degree of security at a large gathering like that. So I think we could handle it very easily through the application process and a security requirement.
I'm not just concerned about the security requirement. I'm also concerned about because I don't think security was an issue that Travis brought up.
Okay.
I think the concern he brought up is that it is offensive to people that may be worshiping, that doesn't want that near their facility, you know, that they'd be offended by that. And so therefore, the question to us would be, is there a way in the thing that we can have some type of review process so we think it makes sense or not, we or somebody, I don't care, not be us, but there's some type of review beyond security, you know, is it an appropriate location? Maybe we have to set some type of guidelines or whatever down the road for that.
I mean, one could put a requirement from the supplementary standards that, you know, if serving beer and wine, that there be a distance from a front door of a church or something to that effect. The problem with requiring council review is a lot of these special use permits, as you know, we hear about them less than 30 days before an event sometimes because people are a little bit negligent about coming forward and getting their permits. And often there are food trucks with, maybe it is beer and wine. So that would be a real hardship for some of those applicants who have kind of been planning.
And I'm saying, I didn't say
Yeah,
us,
okay.
I don't want us to be the review process for it. But
Yeah.
I'm saying is that there needs to be some type of review. I would hope that the planning board, that we as a town are paying to do these things, and we trust to do these things, and that follow our wishes, would have a guideline to follow, but yet there would be some type, it just wouldn't be just anybody sell whatever they want to sell. That there would be, if you're selling this, then there are certain requirements that we will make sure taken care of. And one of those things is how far away from a church or things like that, that we think could be an issue. You know, I mean, there's common sense things, I think, that's a part of that too. That's all.
Well, I think it would be easy to put a distance location in the supplementary standard where it says locations, add a line, you know, so many feet from a church, whatever number that would be.
What would be reasonable? I agree with you. I know that our current policies dictate that to some degree as far as restaurants and stuff, the way it's placed. I know it's depending on how it's zoned, but I think we need to put some type of, I don't know that there's a perfect answer for a number, but, you know, within the property area.
I don't know the number, but you could word it such, food trucks with beer and wine would be required to have a setback of X number from the front door of a church. I don't know what that magic number is.
Mr. Winsman, would it be appropriate for you if we were to table this and you could bring us back a draft? Is there anything pending with this business?
There isn't, but events come up all the time, and I feel very,
Well, you said we have 3, and how long? I mean,
well,
we got to get it right.
but we have special events all the time, and we're basically been in violation of our own ordinance for quite some time. And now that I'm aware of it, it bothers me.
Mayor, unless the council has further discussion, I'd make a recommendation or motion that we would table this issue, seeking the revisions, and if there's any other feedback that needs to be for the planning department, and I'll let that motion stand.
You gonna bring it back at a certain time?
Yeah, within next month, if so appropriate. Yeah, we might need to put a time on it.
All right, so we have a motion to table this for the planning director to take another look at it, and as far as the distance, as far as the sale of beer and wine, I think is your main concern, is that correct?
Alcohol.
Alcohol, and a distance from the place of worship.
All right.
If you could take a look at that and bring us back some wording, maybe for next month. We'll table this until next month.
Do you want to wait on that?
Second.
Yep, so you made the motion.
Yeah, that's
to
correct.
table. And a second. All in favor? All opposed?
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks for the feedback.
Mayor, I do have a question for Mr. Winsman. We discussed the procedures with the planning board hearing cases before they come to council. Have we got a resolution on that?
We're having a kind of a subcommittee of the planning board to talk about the UDO coming up, and I do have a potential solution, and we're looking at conditional zoning in lieu of a lot of the special use permits, not necessarily completely ridding ourselves of special use permits, but for many of those things, they need to become conditional zoning instead of special use permits. And Bob has reviewed that draft, and it's kind of it's been reviewed, or the idea came from Adam Lovelady at the School of Government, exactly how to do it. So I think it's going to work out.
Well, I just want to make the notion that our planning board is essential, and I appreciate what efforts they make. I just hope that you would review that with them as well, if it's appropriate, and if we can support or help in any way, because that is a tremendous task, especially that UDO group. They have done a lot of work. I just want to say thank you, and please make sure that they're involved in that process.
Yes, sir.
Thanks, Steve. Okay, our next public hearing is fiscal year 2019-2020 budget. In accordance with North Carolina General Statute 159-12B, before adopting the budget ordinance, the board shall hold a public hearing, at which time any persons who wish to be heard on the budget may appear. I will entertain a motion to open the public hearing. Motion. Second. All in favor? All opposed? Okay. Mr. Manager, I will turn it over to you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to dim the lights, if that's all right. Tonight we have a public hearing on the budget. The budget process started as far back as November of 2018. At that time, department heads that are scattered out around you here worked their budget process through their own individual departments, submitted those to me, and we started working through this process of what we were going to do in the upcoming year starting July 1st. As we worked through that process, we had several capital items. And when I say capital items, what I mean is big ticket one-time purchases like vehicles and streets and buildings and infrastructure for water and sewer and electric, those type of things. We had a large number of those. So in mid-April, actually I think it was April 11th, we met with the council. We went through a review session and prioritized what we thought we could afford based on last year's budget numbers. So we used a status quo number, which is a budget number from last year. We went through that process. We included all that in a draft budget, presented it to the council the next week, and then we started working through every single line item. This all culminated in early May when we sat down and started going through the capital items again a second time to decide what was the high priority items that we could not include in the budget and what items did we need to include in order to keep providing the essential services at a level that we have been providing for 100 years. And so several things were added back into the budget. That caused us to put our tax rate back at 57 cents, which is where this budget sits today. I'm going to go through that process a little bit more here in a minute, but some of the budget highlights that are in the budget now, we are balanced in all three funds. We have a little over $15 million in the general fund, 16.8 in the electric fund, and about 8.5 in the water sewer fund. That's our total budget numbers. When I say balanced, I mean we have that much revenue coming in and that many expenses going out. So it's the same. Tax increase, there is no tax increase. It stays the same at 57 cents. The tax rate is the same. It's been that way, by the way, for about 16 years now. Electric fees and charges are also unchanged. When I say status quo, I mean same as they currently are. Water fees and sewer fees, the sewer fees are going to increase by 10%, and that is because Johnston County is raising their rate by 10% to us. We use their sewer plant. In order for us to keep exactly where we are today, we have to increase that 10% as well. So we're just passing along the increase that Johnston County is forcing on us. Our water fees are staying the same with the exception of our bulk water rate, which is a water rate that we charge our biggest provider, which is Johnston County, and that is increasing by 10% as well. Our general fund balance remains well above our 25% fiscal policy requirements that were set back in 2011. And we are including a significant number of capital expenditures trying to catch up from some of the years past. And this is where we got into having to raise our tax rate back to 57 cents. As you can see, almost $2 million in the general fund, over $1 million in the electric fund, and 1.3 in the water sewer fund. We also maintained our medical employee benefits at a similar level. And last year, the council approved to do a salary study through Piedmont Triad. Those salary study results came back. This includes the implementation of that salary study and adding a 2.5% increase the last 6 months of the year, which is effective January 1, not July 1. Some of the major capital expenditures that we're talking about. In the police department, we were replacing 7 cars at a cost of a little over $200,000, 13 portable radios at $37,000. We had a K-9 unit retire during this current fiscal year, and this is a replacement for that unit, not an additional one. The fire department, 19, this is their air packs they have to wear into the burning building. We replaced 19 of them in the current budget. We have to replace the second half next year. All of those are going out of OSHA required dates. So they're only good for so long, then they have to be replaced. We also have a replacement fire engine that is actually going to be in budget fiscal year 2021, so not this coming year, but the next year. But it takes 8 to 12 months to build and order that, so we will be ordering it in the next fiscal year and paying for it in the following fiscal year. Public Works, we have our annual resurfacing of $260,000. North and South Equity Drive is going to be reconstructed, as well as sidewalk added around one side for pedestrian traffic. If you've been out to North or South Equity Drive, it doesn't take you long to drive that road to realize that it's the new Venture Drive that we had a couple years ago and needs to be redone. And we have a pickup truck in Public Works that's being replaced. We needed a new knuckle boom truck this year. That's the big claw truck that goes down, picks up all your yard debris every week. We did not include the whole thing in the budget. We pushed it off till next year, but it's a $160,000 purchase. We put $80,000 in the budget this year. We'll add $80,000 next year and purchase it in 2021 budget. So again, we're trying to be pay as we go, so to speak. We have a new splash pad to go in at Smith Collins Park, which is part of the recent park study that we had done, and the cost of that is $125,000. If you recall, there was a Eva Ennis pool in that area that had to be torn down due to cost, and this is a replacement for that pool. It's a more economical replacement because it doesn't require staff to be there all the time. The Shrek, we have minor purchases there. If you've been out there at all, you'll see the big gym curtain that goes all the way across. It goes all the way up the ceiling. It's kind of torn in several places. It's actually becoming somewhat not only of a nuisance, but a little bit of a hazard as people try to work their way around that and run into it. So there's some pool features that are also being replaced. Again, not new. Nothing in here is new. This is all replacement stuff or repairs of things that we currently have. So again, major capital expenditures and utilities in the water plant. In the current budget, 1920 was approved an additional reservoir clear well to go right off of 2nd Street, right across the street, or just down from the water plant. That's $1 million. And that is money that we're paying for, we're not financing. We have 3 filters in the water plant that need to replace at $100,000. We have our constant I&I reduction, which is where water comes into our sewer pipes. When that water comes in and when it rains, goes to the wastewater treatment plant, and then we have to pay to process that rainwater. So when we can clean up our pipes, it saves us money, keeps your sewer rates down. Durwood-Stevenson Highway, we have a 16-inch water line that we're trying to get to the west side of town. We are built up on each side of the bridge on Durwood-Stevenson Road, or Highway. This phase here would be our final phase, which would run that water line underneath that bridge. Next grid is our automatic metering, which is an annual replacement, or not replacement, addition as we move to automatic metering both in water and electric. And our manhole repairs is again an item for mitigation that will save us money if we keep our manholes where water can't go in. Then we're saving money by not having to process rainwater through the wastewater treatment plant. A new outfall machine, it's a piece of equipment that's required for the water and sewer department. Sewer department actually $70,000. In our electric, we're beginning design and construction of the North Circuit at $950,000. The North Circuit, if you've been out to Booker Dairy Road, you've seen it all under construction for the last year. There's a new portion of that road that comes around from where Booker Dairy runs north and south all the way around to Ava Gardner Boulevard, and there's no electricity there. If we want to develop that, we have to provide utilities out there. So this will provide us with the design and the implementation of that circuit for that area so that we can build out there. We have a transformer on Hospital Road that went underwater during Hurricane Matthew, caused our hospital to be shut down for several weeks. There's money in the budget to raise that transformer higher than Matthew levels so that hopefully that won't happen again. Again, we have no change in our tax rate, no change in our electric rates, 10% increase in our bulk water rate only, which is the county rate for them. 10% pass-through increase for sewer, no capital asset transfer from electric to the utility fund. Back in 2010, 11, 12, actually all the way up to 2015, we were moving money from the electric fund, which is a separate fund from our general fund, into our general fund to make up for losses. In 2016, we eliminated that transfer. We no longer move money from electricity into our general fund to pay for general fund expenses. Let me elaborate on that for just a minute. In Smithfield, you have 3 funds. You have water, sewer, electric, and the general fund, which is everything that's not water and sewer and electric, okay? You can't commingle the funds. If you do, all you're doing is supplanting other things. You're basically putting your police officers are being paid by your electric rates. There's also statutory restrictions. You can only transfer so much, and it's based on how much capital you have in each department. So we do not do that. This is one reason that we have been able to keep your electric rates low and at times not have to raise them when communities around us are raising them. So this is a practice that we ended and a practice we do not want to start again. Even though we could probably legally move $350,000 a year from electric to general fund, it's a process that will only be an artificial tax for your general fund and increase your electric rates in the end.
Mike,
Yes.
that should say general fund instead of utility fund, shouldn't
It should, I'm sorry. That's a misprint. Transfer from electric to general fund. Thank you for pointing that out. And again, we begin the North Circuit design and construction. Some future issues that we're going to be looking at down the road. United Financial Solutions, UFS, is currently evaluating our water rate structure. We last had one done in 15. We're having another one done now to see if our water rates are where they should be for our growth, as well as for, to run revenue neutral, so to speak, for all of you. Our goal is not to make money on water, sewer, or electricity. It's simply to run the operation. That's why we don't want to transfer any money into the general fund. Electric rates were reduced by 4.5% in fiscal year 2018. In April of this year, our electric rates, what we pay for it, our wholesale rate, was raised by 1.2%. This budget does not pass along that increase. Instead, we believe that we can absorb that increase and leave the rates the way they are. Some of the communities around us, you've probably heard, are raising their electric rates 1.2%. We are not. It's important for us to try to stay competitive with Duke Progress. In many areas, we're able to do that and even be lower. Not every area yet, but by trying to hold the line on expenses, we can do that. However, next year, right now, Electricities is projecting another 3% increase in wholesale rates in April. So we're going to have to wait and see how that works its way out. So may not be able to keep it as low as it is all the time. But we'll know more when April rolls around next year. They were projecting a 3% increase this year. They only increased at 1.2%. We were able to absorb that. Depending on our growth, we'll just have to wait and see how that shakes out next year. This is our revenues for property taxes of what we've seen in the last 6 years. And the last one is the current fiscal year that will end July 1, and that's a projected figure, which is basically the same as last year. So that's how much money we take in property taxes. That's what pays the bulk of all your services in town that is not water or sewer or electric related. Sales tax is our second biggest revenue amount. You can see here about $2.5 million in fiscal year 18. This year, we're not selling quite as much. We're projecting a little bit lower figure, still a strong figure. But it's important here to point out that you would think, as a layperson, that we have the outlet centers. We have a lot of hotels. We have a lot of restaurants. We have a lot of sales tax going through Smithfield. Unfortunately, all of our sales tax goes to the state, and the share that comes from Johnston County goes to the county. The county takes the lion's share of that, even though we have to pay for all the infrastructure, all the services, everything to maintain it. Large majority of that sales tax goes to the county. The remainder gets split up by cities, and it gets split up based on population. So, City of Clayton, or Town of Clayton, as you might want to call it, they have a bigger population than we do. So they actually receive more sales tax dollars that originate from Smithfield than the town of Smithfield does. And that is the way the General Assembly has it set up. There's nothing we can do about it. So our sales tax revenue is not nearly as high as what many people think it should be, or that it is. It sounds like a big number, but it is a very small number when you look at all the sales taxes coming through Smithfield. Some fund balance comparisons. Fund balance is like our savings. It's how much money we have in reserve based on how much we spend every year. You can see the blue line is our general fund line. In 2014, we were at 40%, which is very strong. You want to try to stay at a minimum of 12%. We have a fiscal policy to stay at least at 25%. Right now, we're about 85%. That number will drop down some next year because we're using $1 million out of that fund balance to redo Equity Drive. But that's what it's for. It's for services for the public so that we can afford those expenditures without having to acquire more debt. Your orange line here is water and sewer. The dip right here is because of those I&I issues I spoke about. We had a lot of water that we were having to spend going through our sewer pipes. Those were rainy years, and we ended up paying a lot more money. So we did a good job of helping that issue by fixing a lot of our sewer pipes. And that's why you've seen our fund balance go back up. This year, it's been a rainy year. So I anticipate that this is going to back down a little bit because we're going to have to pull a little bit of money out of fund balance, and Greg's going to probably talk about that a little bit later as we get into some budget amendments in order to pay for that. The red line is your electric line. Our electric utility is very strong in just about every area. Very pleased, I'm sure most of you are as well, with the service that you receive from our electric. Many times when we have storms, your power's back on very quickly. It's not unusual to hear areas out in the county being without county for days or even longer when everybody here is up and running within a few hours. So our electric utility is very strong. They're very proactive, and they do a good job of doing everything we can to keep those lights on. This is kind of the pie graph of showing you where all of your property tax dollars, your sales tax dollars, those issues that are not water, sewer, electric related are going. Majority of it is right here in your police department. About 28% of all that revenue goes for them. After that, you have your fire department at about 15% of all that revenue. So those two things are making up almost 40% of your budget, just fire and police alone. After that, your recreation, if you add your recreation, your aquatic center, and your Sarah Yard Center together, you're about 15%, which is about the same as the fire department. So if you look at all those as recreation related, which we do, you're at about the same amount of expenditure as your fire department. After that, your street department is about 10%, and then everything else drops off pretty far. Sanitation at 7%. Sanitation is somewhat self-funded because you do pay extra sanitation fees that accompany your utility bills when you get them for both grass or debris pickup as well as your trash collection. And we run that as revenue neutral as we can. I will also point out here that 6% of this is your debt service. What that is that's how much your loans are. That's how much is going out of this budget to pay for debt that we have acquired that we still have on the books. 6% is a really good figure. Water and sewer, you'll see 65% of the water and sewer fund is sewer. That's the lion's share of it. 23% is a water plant. And then you have 8% of that is debt, your debt payments that you're making. And 4% is a contingency fund or money that's set aside in case we need something that wasn't foreseen in the budget. The electric fund is even smaller. Obviously, you've got the large lion's share, 96% going to the electric service in general. 2% of that is debt. We have hardly no debt in the electric fund. We are very good about paying as we go, which is another reason why we're able to keep your rates where they are. You also have a small amount of contingency there if we run over on some type of a project or we have a hurricane and we have a lot of lines down, things that we didn't foresee that we can dip there without having to actually go outside the budget. Some things in our current debt. This is all the debt that the town has. Well, a lot of cities our size will have 2 and 3 pages that look like this. Some things worth mentioning is this Booker Dairy Road extension loan through BB&T is a $2 million loan. You can see it's set to be paid off in March of 22. That was a debt that was supposed to be paid off, I believe, in March of 25, and we were able to use some money that came in from that project to decrease that debt and bring it down to be paid off in 2022. That will make, once that's paid off, that will make our water and sewer fund much stronger than it is. Not that it's not now, but that is be a helpful thing for us. Other than that, you have some small debts. One loan, we only have 2 loans out in the electric fund. This one will be paid off in November. Same as this one, they're a loan that was taken out together. That'll only leave us one loan in electric. Let's see, you have a loan here for rolling stock, that's vehicles. That'll be paid off in October of 20. And then another one here in May of 20, which is again vehicles, $140,000, not big loans. But after that, you've got, this debt is going to be around a while. And that's a big thing to consider, and the council considered it as well when they were looking at your tax rate. We do not want to take on a lot more debt without debt falling off. So that means we need to pay as we go. Very quickly, in 2021, fiscal year 20-21, we're looking at about $1.7 million of capital expenditures that we're going to have. And that's in all general, this is just general fund now. This is where your property tax dollars are. Those are the things that we're going to have to buy in that year. In the next year, 21-22, we got $1.5 million worth of additional capital items. And then 3 years from now, we've got $1.46 million, so almost another $1.5 million of capital items that's going to have to be purchased. We can't take on debt for everything because we've got quite a bit there that's going to be hanging around a while. We need to pay as we go. Do you remember back, I mentioned the knuckle boom truck. We put $80,000 away this year for that, $80,000 next year. We pay cash for it, we buy it, and we roll on with it, and you get the services you need. Those are the kind of things we need to keep doing, and those are the kind of things I believe the council is supportive of. At least that's the direction I've been given. So when we looked at how we can do all of these things and keep these services the same, this is why our tax rate remains at 57 cents. Now, a lot of communities around us, including the county and our neighbor Clayton, I don't want to pick on them, but both of them have tax rates higher than us. And they have a lot of other things that they're doing too, that this council has chosen not to do. Motor vehicle taxes. There is a tax that we could tax every single motor vehicle in the city of Smithfield up to $30 per vehicle. And that money would go towards fixing roads and infrastructure. It's something we've looked seriously at, something other communities are doing, very close to us. But we have not done that. Council has chosen not to tax or add additional taxes to any of you. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to lower our tax rate, add $30 per vehicle, and you're still paying the same thing. It just doesn't make any sense to me, and I don't think it makes any sense to the council. So these are some of the issues in a nutshell that we've been dealing with for quite some time. That is my presentation. I tried to put as much in there as I could in the short time that I had since November, brings you from November to today. And I'll entertain any questions the council might have first.
Thank you, Mr. Manager. Great presentation. Any questions for the manager at this time from the council?
Mayor, I'd like to make a couple points relating to the budget. We've had workshops since April, and all the council's been there. One thing I wanted to make sure we mentioned, he touched on the electrical rate program, and it was mentioned, I think the citizens should know, it was mentioned that, well, maybe we should increase the rates. This board decided to put a rate stabilization fund in to absorb the cost. But it was even mentioned, why don't you raise the electrical rate and just lower the tax? Well, my concern with that is only 2/3 of our town participates in the electrical program. So essentially, you're not equally taxing for the needs. The other thing that I wanted to bring up, speaking of that, is, can you go back to that last slide, Mike?
I can. This one?
Yes. You know, looking at debt service, some of this debt, you can see when it was acquired, you can see when it's going to, be fulfilled. But the Friends of the Park and the Aquatic Center was decisions that this board made to build that asset. And that come at a huge cost to the citizens of Smithfield. We're operating at about $700,000 annually, and this board's had those discussions. I just want to make sure that the citizens understand that. And that is a huge concern, but it's not something that we have anything to do to overcome yet until we can achieve that debt. The real facts are, discussions have been made. Should we get out of the business? But that's not been popular amongst this board, and there's rules and requirements that says that we can't do that, the way the money was obtained. And I'm not against the SRAC, but I think people need to know that that is a huge burden for Smithfield when decisions that were made by the citizens and by this board at the time. The other thing I want to point out is, me as a councilman, I'm elected by the people to do the right thing. And I have worked really hard, and I want you guys to replace me if I haven't done my job. And that goes for every person on this board. We've all been involved in these budget sessions, and we've had time to bring it before. We've had this book in our hand, and I talked to the manager today, and there was zero feedback provided to him besides some questions that Mr. Barber had about the revenue numbers. I say all that to say that I certainly hope that as we move forward, we can support this as a group. It's just very difficult when you look at the tax revenue and the difference that it would offset. But there's a few simple points to be made. We have options in Smithfield, and I totally understand them. I'll give you an example. We have a public works department that picks up your trash, your yard debris. They work tirelessly to get that done every day, whatever district they're in. Some of the other communities has made a choice not to do that. So we could avoid the knuckle boom truck, we could sell our trash trucks, but what would happen is we would not have control of the cost, which we do, and ours is very comparable, and they ain't gonna pick up nothing but one can. Everybody in this room puts more than one can beside the road, and them young men and women pick it up every day. I just want to make those things point those things out. We've had a lot of discussion about our water program, and I think some of the aggressive citizens that we have been very instrumental in helping us obtain some information. Some of them are in this room tonight. But we've got decisions to make. We are partnering with the county to sell water. Well, this board realized, working with Mr. Creedle, that potentially we have made a mistake possibly about how much does it cost to fund water. It's not going to say it's a mistake, but we've worked as a team to make sure we have the right answer, to know that we're moving forward, that the money that we're helping the county is not hurting the citizens of Smithfield. There was some question about it. And there's one other thing I want to mention, and I'm going to hush. We've suffered some very bad storms in this community. We have had hurricanes, we've had potential thunderstorms that's caused damage, we've had ice storms. We've been very blessed. And everybody says, well, why does the reserve fund matter? Well, I'm here to tell you folks, from my understanding is, if the town was to get destroyed, that's what that money's for. It's to put our town back together. And if we're not good stewards of that money, we're not doing our job. We had many businesses and homes flood not that long ago. This board has worked aggressive for storm water, not aggressive enough to some people. But my point is, we've got a survey and a study out there, and who knows what the cost to fix that's going to be. It's going to be astronomical. So I just think it's important that we point these things out as we move forward looking at our budget. And I, as a councilman, have to support this budget. Even though you can say it has a tax rate increase, ultimately, we're getting a dang good deal for our money. And I'm very proud of that. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Anyone else? Any comments or questions?
I'll make just a few comments. I think a lot of the things I can echo what Councilman Travis said. I think again we had a very it was a very detailed process that we followed. A lot of things we didn't have answers for until we worked our way through those things. I think it comes down to we have to look at the town of Smithfield. We are bordered against a variety of growth factors that are coming from Raleigh this way. You know, Wake County just increased their taxes by 10%. Wake County taxes by 10% increase so they could cover more of their expenses. I talked to a realtor today who's up there, works with me, and she says, you know, more and more people are moving this way because it's just pricing out of the market. So we're going to have more and more. Well, when you get more and more people, that's also going to cause more and more demand for services. We can be competitive or we can stick our head in the sands. Years ago, we can see evidence of where the town of Smithfield was tried to be too conservative and kept their head down and didn't go after things that they should have gone, and now those things are gone. So we have to be able to make sure that we prepare for our future too. I think we've got a lot of things that other people don't have. I like the Aquatic Center. I think it's a great resource. We could not afford it today. If we wanted to today, no way could we afford it. So I mean, very fortunate that we're always halfway done paying on it, right? We're halfway, just reached the halfway mark. So that's great news. Are we halfway? I think something like that. But the point is, I think the town has done a good job at doing that. If you look at the property comparison rate, tax rate boy, I'm thinking too many things. Senator Michael Scott surprised us. If you look, it shows projected with the 57 cents tax rate. It shows less money revenue coming in from taxes than was this year. So, I mean, that's reality numbers. So if we was to reduce the tax rate from 57 cents, we'd have to take out of that at least $500,000, $600,000, something like that. I think it was what we calculated. And that's got to come from somewhere. Also, we have people, as Travis says too, we have people that work in our town. One of the things that you know, if you listen to me, that we were very much eager to get these salary studies done because all of us believe we should be paid what we deserve to be paid. And that our workers, people who work for us tirelessly day in and day out, should be making the money that they deserve to make. And for us to keep our taxes low so that we rob, all we're doing is robbing it from our employees. That's not right. You wouldn't want people to do you that way either. We have to be good stewards of our money, but we also have to be good employers to our employees. You notice we also were able to keep our health insurance rate low because negotiation that was done through our town department kept our prices down. Lots of work has been done to keep this where it's at. I think this budget is very much in line with providing opportunities for our growth while protecting our citizens and our assets and our employees for our future, and making Smithfield the type of place that we continue to want to live in, the town of Smithfield.
Thank you, sir. Anyone else?
I do have a question, and in your handout, you had property tax comparison. I don't remember what page it was, but it showed fiscal year 18, our property taxes, and by that I mean ad valorem property tax. Almost
there.
5.6 million. And then that projected 2019 is roughly the same.
Yes,
That's this year that'll end 6/30.
yes.
In your budget, recommended budget, on line 1 on page 17, it has 6.71. 6.7 million. Is that what we're projecting next year?
That's what we're projecting next year.
So that is actually a substantial increase in property taxes, not less. That's $1.2 million difference. Do we know the breakdown of that 1.2 million? What percentage is new development versus what percentage is caused by revaluation?
Well, you also have growth in there, and your growth factor is about 2.7%. If you take out the growth factor and you then look at your revenue neutral numbers, you're looking at an increase of about $627,000. That's your difference between a revenue neutral rate and the rate that 57 cents. I don't know if that answers your question or not.
Pretty much half the increase in revenues is because of the growth we've had within our city limits.
Yes.
The other half would be the revaluation. I will say that keeping the tax rate the same, it is a tax increase for a lot of folks. And it just depends on how lucky you are, I guess. Is your property value increasing, or is it staying stagnant, or is it even going down? I've seen some properties go down in tax value. And I think we have a less of a increase in our area than they did in the western part of the county. Having said that, I don't like a budget that's not revenue neutral. However, I've been on the council 7 years now. We've come through some tough times. We're financially healthy. Quite frankly, we got financially healthy by being very frugal. As one of our temporary finance directors says, we cut about all the low-hanging fruit we could in those tough days, but then we probably didn't undertake some projects we should have undertaken. And I think this budget sets us back on the right track. We've got to address the real needs. I've been a firm believer that the best economic development you can do for your town is to provide the services the citizens want and need in the most economical manner. And I think we've done that. I think we're doing that with this budget. Although, quite frankly, I'm not happy that this budget is going to be a tax increase for some of our citizens. But that's what the citizens are ultimately going to have to decide is what type of town we want and what services we want. Do we want a police department that's top-notch? Do we want a fire department that's top-notch? Do we want our streets repaired and kept in good repair? Do we want our trash picked up? We are a very high-service community, and we have been. And I think people who move into this town see that very quickly. I can't believe that I can put whatever I want to on my curb and Lenny and his crowd will pick it up. Sometimes I think it's probably not right, but for me to take advantage of that. But it is a high-service community, and as much disdain as I have for increasing taxes on anybody, including myself, we've been through the painstaking task of this budget, and I would support this budget. That's all, Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Ashley. Anyone else on the council having comments or questions for the manager?
Yeah, let me say something. This was a hard budget for a lot of us because we have a lot to do now. Mr. Perry Harris is in the audience here, and he was a councilman for District 2, which I am now. And he did a lot of work to get our finances back, as did Mr. Ashley and several others before I even got here, because I was very surprised from what you hear from what is reality. And we were in very good shape when I got here 2 years ago, to my surprise. And now we have the opportunity to move forward. And yes, we have a little bit of some spending in this, and I hate that the taxes are the way they are for the reevaluation. But at the same token, we have to keep moving forward and we don't want to increase anything. I think the board as a whole never wanted to increase any tax rate that we had. I think this is a good way to move forward. We have had to kick some things down the road, as we said 100 times each meeting, kick the can down the road. Well, I think we've caught up to the can, and now we have the opportunity to move Smithfield forward and better prosperity for the future. And I will vote for this budget. There was a lot of times consumed and scratching their heads, but I think this is the best for our town at the moment. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Stevens. Anyone else? Seeing none, is there anyone in the audience that would wish to speak on the budget? Please come forward.
I'm Emma Gimmel at 207 Hancock Street, Smithfield, and I do want to say how much I appreciate the services that we get in the town, because we really do get a great deal of services that we all enjoy, and I'm one of the ones that do appreciate that, and I really have enjoyed many of the services, and the people that are doing the services are usually when I get a chance to say something to them, they're very amenable, and I'm very appreciative toward them, telling them so. My question is for Mr. Scott: is the tank or the well, is it a tank or a well that is the addition, the water plant addition clear well?
Have to raise it up. It's actually a tank. It's an above-ground tank. It's called a clear well, but it's not flat with the ground. It is a tank that sits on the ground, but it's not an elevated tank like you see what we call the Jones Brothers tank or the tank that's in West Smithfield. It is a tank that sits on the ground, much like the one that is there right now across the street.
I just want to make clarification there. I'm not used to these things. Oh, no. Thanks. I just wanted to make clarification, because if it is a tank, like you said, it is a second tank. So we will have 2 tanks and 2 clear well tanks. And it is, in the research that Pam Lampy and I have done, we do not feel that that extra tank is needed, and I will speak to that later. Thank you, and thank you for your services.
Thank you, Ms. Gill. Anyone else wishing to speak on the budget?
Hi, my name is Leslie Lazarus. I live over on 140 Valleywood Circle. I was just curious, I know there can't be anything done about it this budget, but does the council have, like, what are your plans to address the SRAC, the aquatic center? Because it's a $700,000, 7% of the town budget, going towards that to pay off the debt and to run the building. What exactly are we planning towards the future?
That you're asking
Yeah.
as far as what? As far as
How
we
to
budgeted for it?
offset that budget. Either how to make the money to run the place, or are we gonna get rid of it or sell it?
Let me see if I can answer.
Yeah, no problem.
Thank you, and Leslie sits on our Appearance Commission, right? Yeah. Yep, and the Planning Board. So we appreciate your services to the town. In reality, the general fund is there as a service provider. Garbage, police, fire, parks. It's not intended to be a money maker. We try to be as revenue neutral as we can. That building and the services that it provides will likely not be revenue neutral. We can increase fees, but then you're going to price people out of it. So the reality is it's ours. It's a service. It's looked at as a service for our community, something that, quite frankly, has been an economic development driver. So while you're looking at the 7%, you have to realize that we're getting 300 homes out on Buffalo Road, and every one of those wants to be a member of the SHRAC. They're putting it in their HOA that everybody out there is going to be a member. That's going to help with revenue for the SHRAC, but it also helps us to get those 300 homes and all the property taxes that go with them. And that isn't figured into that 7%. So there's a lot of things that are subjective that you just don't see that the SHRAC brings to the community in the way of services as well as quality of life for our residents. So are we looking to try to make it as revenue neutral as we can? Yes, we are. Do we believe we're going to get there? Probably not. But when we look at the services that it provides and the other things that are ancillary that come in with that, we think we've got a pretty good investment there.
You mentioned that it was written into something with the houses that are supposed to be being built over on Booker Dairy. Could you?
Actually, Buffalo Road.
Buffalo Road, sorry. Could you explain more about what that is?
The East River subdivision that's going in on Buffalo Road, it's not quite 300 homes. As part of the HOAs there, that subdivision wants to bring everybody in there as part of their HOA association dues to the SHRAC. So last year, the council worked with them to create a separate rate for HOAs. So basically, they will pay us whatever interval we want, whether it's one annual payment for everybody there or biannual payments or however we choose to structure that contract. So everyone out there will become members. So it's part of their HOA dues. They don't have any choice. It's going to be written into their covenants that they have to be a member. They have to pay into it, and then they will pay us in one lump sum for all their residents.
So I just want to make it clear, even with that, you don't think that it's ever going to be revenue neutral, even after years in the future when we get the loan paid off?
No. When we are paid off with our debt, a lot of that's going to depend on growth and how many people continue to use it, but it's also going to force us to evaluate the condition of all of the infrastructure there. We have swimming pools out there, we have splash parks out there. Will those need to be repaired at that point? And, you know, those are games that we'll play when we get closer to that time.
Thank you.
Anyone else wishing to speak? Mr. Daniels.
I'm Hank Daniels with the Sleep in the Suites, and I appreciate the fact that y'all having a budget to fix Equity Drive. It's in bad repair. A lot of traffic out there for the hotels, restaurants, and the movie theater, and the sidewalks will make it safer for all the people who are visiting Johnson County, visiting Smithfield. So thank you for that. being included in the budget.
Thank you, Mr. Dean, for all your continued investment in our town. Anyone else speak? Any other questions for the council? If not, I will entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
I'll second.
Motion and a second to close the public hearing. All in favor?
Aye.
What is the wishes of the council? Entertain a motion this time to adopt the budget, or
I thought we were gonna get to that in business. Is that not where it is?
The last
No.
business item is only there as a
Either-
placeholder in
right.
case you want to have additional meetings to discuss the budget.
we can either adopt now, or if there's major issues or anything that we need to discuss, that was the reason for that placeholder there, so that we could schedule another meeting if needed.
I move we approve the budget as written.
I second.
Have a motion and a second to approve the budget. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you very much. I would like to just say a very big thank you for our town staff and for our department heads for all their hard work that they put into this budget, and as well as to our town manager for all his hard work that has gone into this. Thank you very much, Mr. Manager, for your presentation. And lastly, to this council, I want to say thank you. There were a lot of hard and tough decisions that had to go into this budget. A lot of time spent on this budget. We spent many hours on this budget and many budget sessions. I was a bit worried that we were not going to pass this budget tonight, based off of our last budget meeting, and so I'm glad that we got to this stage, and I know you all had some very tough decisions to make, and I commend you for your hard work and your dedication to the town of Smithfield. So thank you, gentlemen, for all that you do. This time we will move on to citizens' comments. If there's anyone wishing to speak during citizens' comments, looks like the first is the Honorable Councilman Harris. Welcome back to the chamber, sir.
Mayor, what's the time limit for public? Does he still live in the town of Smithfield?
I'm Perry Harris. I live at 1205 Baker Street. I've lived there for 29 years. My wife and I have raised our children here. It's a wonderful town. Got a lot of wonderful things here. There's always problems. There's always issues. I'm proud to be a citizen of this town. My wife and I are empty nesters now, and for the past 6 months we have been decluttering, I guess is the word I would say, although at times I felt like maybe I was a hoarder. We've cleaned out closets, drawers, attics, garages, trying to get our house ready to get on the market to move to a smaller home. And in going through some of that, I ran across a letter that I received when I was on the council, and I didn't plan to be here tonight with all of this budget stuff going on. I hadn't really thought about it, but I wanted to take time to read this, or part of this, and I will leave it with you. I don't really need it anymore, but if anybody really wants to look at some of the verbiage, I'm going to skip over. But this was a letter written on January 28, 2013 to the Honorable W. Daniel Evans, Mayor. This letter is from the North Carolina Department of State Treasurer. And Emory was on the council at that time, Andy was a councilman at that time, and I was, so we were copied to this. What it says is, State and Local Government Finance Division, in its role as staff to the Local Government Commission, has analyzed the audited financial statements of the town of Smithfield for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2012. The town continues to have serious financial problems, which the town's governing board must continue to address. Corrective action regarding the issue discussed below will help improve your financial condition and operations. We noted in the general fund the amount of the fund balance available for appropriation as percentage of expenditures as of June 30th, 2012 was 4.48%, which represents an improvement from the previous year, June 30th, 2011 report, which showed 0.85, which is less than 1%. That was the condition this town was in at that time. And it was not a pretty time. Emery's alluded to it already tonight. We went through a situation where our employees didn't get a pay raise. We basically didn't have a savings account. And as you've learned tonight, our general fund is what we operate the town on. Electric, water is a whole separate entity. And we were robbing that quite a bit at that time, we learned, and that's been corrected. And it goes on and on to talk about what the town needed to do, but it does say also that the statewide average at that time for a similar town our size was 37.84%. You've seen tonight in Mike's report that, and I learned recently, that our reserve fund balance is in excess of 80%. And that's remarkable. I know that there are always issues. There always will be issues. But I can say that the employees of this town, the staff of this town, and the town council, you're doing a great job. And I don't come to these meetings. I don't know exactly what you're doing. But whatever you're doing, keep doing it. And as a citizen of this town, my family and I want to say thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Terrace. Yes, sir.
All right, how's everybody doing?
All right, how are you?
I wanted to come in and introduce myself. Councilman Lee invited me to come in a couple sessions ago, and I wasn't able to make it due to working over there at JCC. So I'm representing that school, and I am the basketball coach at the college, the men's basketball coach, as of September of 2019, 18. All right. So my interest here is trying to work with the councilmen and the community into improving the relations and getting these young men and young women more involved in what goes on here in the city of Smithfield. Have some participants from the area, but there's been I think there's a need for more involvement between the city and programs and things that can create excitement. So as the coach there now, and my name is Jay Creasy, I'm not an employee here full time. I work in Raleigh and Wake County. I live in Raleigh, but I do work part time at JCC as the men's basketball coach. So I wanted to come in and get a chance to offer support and ask for support. As we do things, there are different events and things in the community, we would like to be a part of those things. We would like an invitation to come out and, especially with the youth, and show those children that, these are young men and young women who are furthering their education. They're using sport basketball as a vessel to reach other goals. So I want to get that, create an interest, create a buzz. As I create the schedule for this upcoming basketball season, I've reached out to some of the high schools and talked about getting more involvement, inviting the student bodies to come out. Obviously, we play at the Shrek. That's where we host our games. And getting more involvement. And us, by asking people to come out and by offering our service to come out and do things in the community. I intend to partner up with a elementary school and start programs in the schools so that, because kids gravitate to athletes. Kids gravitate to those they see themselves being in the short term. So I think it's important that we start and improve the relationship in the community. JCC is the college post-secondary education of this community. So I think it's important that's recognized and that's embraced. So I ask you all to be supportive. I will bring schedules and things so that you all are made aware. Trying to improve relationships with the newspaper and social media, just getting more people aware of things that are going on, and also offering up our services to do certain things in the community that we can help with, just help bridge the gap and build relationships and pour into the young people. So I wanted to come by and speak with you all and offer those services, and then in turn ask you all to come and be supportive as well. Myself, I'm Jay Creasy. I'm the men's basketball coach, and the women's basketball coach is Al Lunsford. He couldn't be here because he's out recruiting players at the moment, so he couldn't get back in time. But I just wanted to come in and make sure everyone was aware that that is something that that's important. We're both passionate about doing that, and we want to be a part of that. So the things that you have, any type of events that you are putting on, if you could shoot me an email or phone call and say, hey, Coach, we're doing X, Y, and Z. Would some of your guys be available to come out and help and volunteer and provide support and any types of things like that? Those are things that we want to do so that obviously these youth can see things going on, and whether they're aspire, whether they're sport related, whether they're athletes, or whether they're just young students, we want to push them to higher education. So obviously, the junior college level is an opportunity for them. We had graduation 3 weeks ago, and there were some 400 graduates from the community and some surrounding communities. So my mission is as we build and try to improve the quality of what we're doing there, basketball-wise and student-wise, the school is growing. Just wanting to establish stronger relationships so that when we're doing good things, that it's shared with Smithfield. So I think that's important with Johnson County. I think that's important, and that's something I want to see happen in the now, not necessarily in the future, but now. I think it's important. So I ask you all to come out, get involved, come support, cheer, offer your supports, and when you have things going on in your respective careers and your jobs that you may see the use of, how about we see if some of those guys can volunteer and come around and do support. I've done things like this before at the universities I've been at before. I've coached there for 4 years, and we got involved and we did things with schools around in the grade tests and beginning the skills. So those are the type of things that we can do. And service projects are a big thing with student athletes. It's very important that they get involved and do service projects. So we want to make sure we do that. And I'll ask you to provide us with those opportunities. Again, I didn't bring, because I wasn't expecting, I just came here straight from the gym, working out today. But I plan to attend again, and when I have schedules, we get schedules printed out. I'll make sure to bring them so you all can have one if you want. And I'm going to have pocket size and posters. And just visit that website, and my information is on there. If you have something going on, just you kind of email me, let me know, and we'll try to be of the best support the best we can. All right?
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks a lot.
Appreciate it. Anyone else wishing to speak? Here, citizens.
I want to congratulate the town council and Michael Scott for doing such a good job in getting our town, as was stated by several of y'all, in a much better position than it used to be. I am still concerned about some of the expenses that you've got in the budget, in the capital budget, that Pam Lampy and I feel are unnecessary. We are concerned that, because we have previously shared the information regarding our stance on the water expansion, and it is being unnecessary. We are concerned about the water plan items that were addressed in the previous budget, 18-19, and the monies accepted from the county of $3.25 million. And we would like to have some of those things removed from the budget because they're unnecessary. The clear well tank, we have one. The expansion of the water plant and the expansion of the reservoir. You as a town council members have the ability to remove it anytime you are interested in removing anything. You did that with the South Smithfield proposed tank in the 5-year plan. You took it totally out of the budget. The existing clear well tank is sufficient. The 90% rule has nothing to do with the new tank, even when the increase of the county water that we have given. If we have 2 tanks one tank will not be used. However, the unused tank will need to be maintained, used, or not. Also, we are concerned about the disappearance of the unaccounted for water. How did the large amount of unaccounted for water in 2017 North Carolina Water Supply Report to the state disappear in 2019? The reason we were given was software. The result put our daily water usage rate at 94 gallons per day in 2018 compared to 33 gallons per day in 2017. It has tripled our usage, and GPD is gallons per day. Maybe a water plant efficiency study is necessary. I really thought that the water plant was in tip-top shape, but maybe not, especially since we are taking on a larger water user. We also are concerned with the UFS study not being given all the facts they are going to need for our large water consumer and are doing and what we are doing to accommodate the county. The new rate study needs to include expenses that we are incurring because of the county. They should not have a lot, they should have a % of these expenses included in their rate. 2 pipelines that we're doing, Bookadary and Durwood-Stevenson, the new clear well tank if it's not removed, the depreciation of our water plant, the wear and tear on the new tank, a % of future repairs. Remember, the rate study, it's only as good as the information that it is given. Also, the raw water reservoir enlargement. Without the expansion of the water plant, this is an unnecessary item. Pam and I do not feel the water plant expansion and the present items from the 2018-19 budget regarding the water plant expansion are necessary items. Sewer and water pipe leaks need to be addressed before we venture down this water plant expansion road further. In our research, we don't need more water. We greatly need sewer and water repairs. We are asking you to remove something you were going to feel proud of accomplishing. So we're asking you to do something that you're not really going to want to do. But it is not necessary, and so you need to think about it. The problem is we have not found evidence backing up the water plant expansion. If we had, we would not still be here speaking to remove the water plant expansion from your budget. Thank you. We're just concerned citizens trying to help y'all understand that some of the things you may or may not know, we've tried to tell you over the last 10 months.
Thank you, Ms. Gill. Anyone else wishing to speak?
Of course, I'm going to hit some of the same issues as Em, but before I do that, I want to thank everybody in this room who really have made this town a great town to live in. And I know in the beginning, Em and we probably came across as not very nice people, and I apologize if we did that in the beginning, but we truly love Smithfield, and we only want the best for this town. And we feel like everybody in this room is working toward that same goal, and we want to help. And everybody here has been kind and listened to us lots of times, and we really appreciate it. And we only want the best. And anyways, this is what I'm going to say. I'm Pam Lampy. I live at 415 North 2nd Street in Smithfield. I want to talk tonight about the $3.25 million that the town council agreed to accept from Johnston County in the bulk water agreement dated August 7, 2017. It is my understanding that we invoiced the county and they have remitted to us the $3.25 million. I attended the budget meeting session on April 11, 2019, where the council agreed to accept this money. It was stated at that budget meeting that the funds might be used to pay for three things: engineering fees of up to $1.3 million to the Wooten Group for the water plant expansion plans, or to help pay for Durwood Stevenson and Buffalo Road water pipe construction, or three, to help pay for the cost of a clear well storage tank, which cost over $1.8 million. I thought there would be further discussion on how or if to spend this money on these three items or any other ones. Now, according to the letter and according to the budget approved tonight, it looks like the council has agreed to allocate part of this money to the water plant clear well tank. And in fact, according to the letter, it says the tank is currently being engineered and will be constructed in fiscal year 2020 as part of the water plant expansion project. Obviously, if our town needs a finishing tank, we should get one. However, as Em stated earlier, we do not feel we need a clear well tank that would require closing North 2nd Street. In my public comments in the May Town Council meeting, I asked for the documentation of the law that would require the town to build another clear well tank. We need facts to justify a purchase of a new tank, and no one provided them, or facts. We do not store any of the water we produce for the county. We already have 2 million gallons of storage. The 80% rule that has been quoted has nothing to do with tank storage. In fact, nowhere in the signed bulk water agreement with the county does it state that we have to construct/purchase a new clear well tank to fulfill our obligation to provide this extra water to the county. It does state, however, we are to provide a meter that gets calibrated periodically. I don't know if we have provided that meter yet. So why do we need a clear well tank that would cost us so much money and require us to close our street? Is it a luxury or a necessity? Or is it just to close off the water plant? And if we need the tank, where are the landscaping plans? How much is budgeted for the landscaping and beautification of the area? Will the road be closed and the landscaping done before the tank is constructed? You promised North Smithfield input in this process. Em and I, like all of you, only want the very best for our town. We feel the town management, the mayor, the council needs to vote to take the expansion of the water plant off its legislative agenda. We sell over half of our water to the county. So if a need arises for more capacity, it will be cheaper for us to buy our capacity back versus expand. We can also easily put the expansion back on the table in the future if we need and can afford it, because we already have a set of plans that we've paid for. So we ask, what do we have to do to set this vote in motion? We also met with Mike Scott last Friday to discuss these issues and others. Mike kindly listened to us, and I believe he was going to talk with Mr. Cradle about the proof of need for a clear well tank, the questions we had about closing the road, landscaping, unaccounted for water, and our concerns about the UFS rate study. So we hope answers are forthcoming. Again, we truly only want the best for Smithfield, so let's fix it together. And thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lambert. Anyone else wishing to speak? All right, at this time we will move on to the consent agenda. Gentlemen, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Make a motion to accept.
Second. Motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. All in favor? All opposed? Motion carries. Move on to business items. The first business item this evening is consideration and request for approval of various fiscal year-end budget amendments. Correct?
Councilman, Mayor. The Finance Department is seeking approval for year-end budget amendments, encumbrances, and encumbrances pertaining to purchase orders. I'll go into as much detail as you would like regarding some 27 budget amendments that we forwarded to you, I think yesterday or day before. These budget amendments are needed throughout the year, but we concentrate during this particular month to do a final cleanup, for lack of a better description. Budget amendments to cover unforeseen expenditures, to relabel expenditures, and sometimes to cover shortfalls. So I'm hoping that the description placed under each amendment is clear enough for your understanding. But again, I will go into detail with any of these that you'd like. And if you don't have any questions, I'll comment on just one or two.
So the ones handed out tonight different than the ones we had in the budget package?
The ones that was handed to you had 28 amendments. In a final proofing, I discovered that one was a duplication. So in the one before you today, there's 27 amendments. For
Mr.
those of you
Sadler,
that have,
I'm sorry.
go ahead.
I'll wait, I had a question, but go ahead.
I was just going to say that some of these you will see year after year. For example, this one here, we collect hotel taxes, and we turn those taxes over to the Visitors Bureau. We project what we'll get when the final numbers come in. There are budget amendments to adjust to that. That's what item number 3 is for. And the other one that I'll take time to comment on has to do with the water department, number 13 in your list. The sewer treatment costs this year, due to primarily heavy rain seasons, have grossly exceeded our budget. At May's report, we were $318,000 over budget, and there's still 2 billings left to be received from the county this year. So I am upping that budget by some $500,000 to cover sewer treatment costs. The bulk of that money is coming from contingency, or some of it's coming from contingency. And when I first did the action form, I made the comment that any budget amendments were being covered by a contingency fund or revenues that we got that we didn't budget for example, FEMA dollars that came in. This is the only exception to that comment. I did have to dig into fund balance to up that budget for sewer treatment.
What was the cost of that?
I upped it by $500,000.
Is that restricted or unrestricted from the fund balance?
Say again?
Was that be from the restricted funds or unrestricted from the fund balance?
Unrestricted. And again, this is the water fund.
Okay, the water fund, thank you.
I move we approve the request.
Let me say one final thing. There are also within your packet a list of encumbrances related to purchase orders. You got that list today. And these are just purchase orders that are still outstanding. Many of the services will be provided and paid for, but we put these on the list as a cautionary measure. We don't want bills to come in after the fact in that purchase order having been liquidated. And then finally, there is encumbrances that don't relate to purchase orders. These are just items that many departments didn't get around to doing this year for various reasons. For example, first on the list is the Wi-Fi project for downtown. That project right now is still being considered. We're waiting on feedback from downtown Smithfield. So there's a list of those. Again, if you have questions about any of them, I'll be happy to comment or have the department heads comment. As you mentioned, to approve these, they do have to be done separately. So there would be 3 different motions to approve, one for the budget amendments, one for encumbrances that pertain to purchase orders, and then one for encumbrances that do not pertain to purchase orders.
Mr. Ashley, would you like to amend your motion, sir, to include all 3 of those?
I move that we approve the budget amendments, that we approve the encumbrances, and then that we approve the encumbrances for purchase orders. Is that sufficient?
That's sufficient.
And whoever seconded it, Steve, you're okay with that? Yes, sir. All right.
If you have any questions, it's okay.
Yep, I got a motion, a second, and now discussion.
Mr. Seiler, in the past, I know it's been done a few different ways. The contingency is really an unallocated portion. I don't see the number here. What amount of contingency will remain? Or you've balanced it? And if there was a balance, does that carry over in the general fund to the reserve fund?
Okay, so if I understand your question, Councilman, I'm not sure how I pull this up. 1 second. Each fund has a contingency.
That's right. I'm talking about the general fund specifically.
Okay, so in the general fund, I'll actually show you where I started to use contingency. And I try to keep these in order because one use of contingency would feed into, or the bottom line would feed into a second use. So the first use of contingency here had to do with just bringing certain departments, certain line items into budget. At the very bottom line there was $321,000 available at this time of the year. I don't remember what it was on the onset and whether or not we used any during the year. I'd have to go back and research that. I think we used a bit of it. $71,000 was used to balance departmental budgets. And then I used it again to fund vacation payouts that employees got last year. Those monies were put in contingency and only pull out what we needed. There was $20,350 used to fund vacation payouts. That left $230,000 in the general fund contingency. And that money will revert to fund balance depending on how our revenues come in compared to expenditures. So, yes, there's $230,000 that could potentially go to fund balance. If revenues are greater than projected in the budget, that number would be increased. If revenues fell short, that contingency could go away. But we are projecting some increase in fund balance at the end of the fiscal year.
Thank you, Greg.
Any other discussion? I have a motion and a second to approve. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
We adopted the budget. I don't think we need the budget discussion, the other business items, so we'll skip over that, and we'll go to council members' comments. Further comments from the council? Seeing none, I will turn it over to the manager for your report, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just a few quick things I want to remind our community about primarily. We had a movie in the park set up for Johnson Park on June 1st. That was postponed due to rain, so it has been rescheduled for June 22nd. That'll start at dusk at Johnson Park for anyone who wants to take their children there and enjoy a night movie in the park. Our Three Little Pigs Triathlon, which is becoming a larger and larger event for our town, is scheduled for June 15th. Starts at 7:30 in the morning at the Shrine. This is a great event. If you haven't been out to watch it before, I recommend you do so. And that is primarily put on by the community and Rotary of Johnston County. The police department has scheduled Coffee with a Cop on Thursday, June 27th at Starbucks from 9 to 11. So anything that's on your mind, have a free cup of coffee from Starbucks, stop in, say hello, and tell the chief how to better do his job. He really appreciates that. Also, on June 14th and 15th, we have the 301 yard sale coming through again. That's a good event for all of the surrounding area, but it is also can be a contentious event. So try to be safe on Highway 301 during those days. Realize there's going to be a lot of people coming through there and people parking probably where they shouldn't be and pulling out into traffic in areas where they maybe aren't as safe as they should be. So we will have extra police operating during that time, make it as safe as possible, but I ask everyone to try to monitor themselves and be safe as well. That is all I have, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, sir.
I do have a question. On this Starbucks Coffee with a Cop, is that free coffee? Because I'm gonna send my daughter over there because she's killing me.
It is free. It is free coffee, but it's a free coffee of their choice. So imagine the mocha lattes are not free.
All right, gentlemen, that concludes our business portion of the agenda. We do need to go into closed session. I have a motion to go into closed session pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 143-318.11, Section A, 3, and 4.
So moved, Mayor.
I have a motion and a second to go into closed session. All in favor? Aye. Go into closed session. Thanks.